From China's desperate fight against foreign invasion in the Boxer Rebellion to humanity's discovery of quantum physics that would revolutionize our understanding of reality. From America's most catastrophic hurricane to Paris hosting the most spectacular World's Fair in history, this single year had it all. From Kodak putting cameras in everyone's hands to Sigmund Freud revolutionizing psychology with his dream theories. From the first rigid airship taking to the skies over Germany to doctors discovering blood types that would save millions of lives. From Paris hosting the Second Olympics to anarchist violence that shook European monarchy. So buckle up as we're about to explore 10 incredible events from the year 1900 because you're watching The Rewind. Chapter 1. The Boxer Rebellion erupts in China. Our journey begins in the heart of the Qing dynasty, where a storm was brewing that would shake the very foundations of Chinese civilization. The Boxer Rebellion, or as the Chinese called it, the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, wasn't just an uprising, it was a desperate cry from a proud nation being humiliated by foreign powers. For decades, European powers, Japan and the United States had been carving up China like vultures. They controlled ports, imposed unfair treaties, and forced Christianity on a Buddhist and Confucian society. The Boxers, mostly young men from rural areas, believed they had supernatural powers that made them immune to bullets. They wanted to drive out all foreigners and Christian converts. On June 20th, 1900, Boxers surrounded the foreign quarter in Beijing, beginning a 55-day siege that would become legendary. 8 nations, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Japan, Austria-Hungary, Italy, and the United States, formed an unprecedented alliance to rescue their citizens. The siege finally ended in August when the 8-nation alliance stormed Beijing. The aftermath was devastating. China was forced to pay enormous war reparations, equivalent to about $40 billion today. This humiliation would fuel Chinese nationalism for generations and ultimately contribute to the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1911. Chapter 2. Planck's Quantum Theory Revolution. Now, let's shift from political upheaval to scientific revolution. On December 14, 1900, a German physicist named Max Planck presented a paper that would literally rewrite the laws of physics. He was trying to solve what seemed like a simple problem. Why do hot objects glow the way they do? But Planck's solution was anything but simple. He proposed that energy doesn't flow continuously like water from a tap. Instead, it comes in tiny, discrete packets he called quanta. Imagine if you could only buy water in specific bottle sizes, never any amount in between. That's what Planck discovered about energy itself. At first, even Planck didn't fully grasp what he'd unleashed. This discovery would become the foundation of quantum mechanics, leading to everything from lasers to computers to GPS satellites. Without Planck's quantum theory, the device you're watching this video on literally couldn't exist. Einstein would later build on this work to explain the photoelectric effect, Heisenberg would develop his uncertainty principle, and Schrödinger would give us his famous cat, all because of a paper presented in Berlin on a cold December day in 1900. Chapter 3. The Galveston Hurricane. America's deadliest natural disaster. September 8, 1900 started as a beautiful day in Galveston, Texas. The city was booming. They called it the New York of the South. With its deep-water port and thriving cotton trade, Galveston seemed unstoppable. But by nightfall, it would be fighting for its very survival. A massive hurricane with winds exceeding 145 miles per hour had been building strength in the Gulf of Mexico. Weather forecasting was primitive in 1900. There were no satellites, no radar, no modern warning systems. The storm surge, reaching 15 feet high, turned the city into a death trap. Isaac Klein, the local Weather Bureau chief, desperately tried to warn residents, but it was too late. The hurricane struck with the force of nature's fury. Entire city blocks were swept away. The storm surge carried houses, people, and debris miles inland. When the winds finally died down, between 6,000 and 12,000 people were dead, making it the deadliest natural disaster in American history. But here's the remarkable part. Galveston didn't just rebuild, it revolutionized coastal engineering. They raised the entire city by up to 17 feet and built a massive seawall that still protects the city today. The disaster changed how America approaches hurricane preparedness forever. Chapter 4. The Paris Exposition and the Birth of Modern Culture. While tragedy struck Texas, Paris was celebrating the dawn of the new century with the most spectacular World's Fair ever conceived. The 1900 Exposition Universelle wasn't just a showcase of technology. It was a glimpse into the future of human culture. 50 million visitors from around the world flocked to Paris to see wonders that seem almost magical today. The moving sidewalk. Imagine people's amazement at a walkway that moved by itself. The Palace of Electricity, illuminated by thousands of electric lights when most people still use candles and gas lamps. Rudolf Diesel demonstrated his revolutionary engine, and the Wright brothers' mentor, Octave Chanute, displayed gliding experiments that would inspire human flight. But the real magic was cultural. This exposition popularized Art Nouveau, launched the careers of countless artists, and introduced the world to cinema on a massive scale. The newly constructed Paris metro system transported visitors around the city, and the exposition's restaurant culture would influence fine dining for generations. The exposition also had a darker side. It featured human zoos, displaying people from colonized nations as curiosities. This reflected the imperial attitudes of the time, but it also sparked early discussions about cultural exploitation that would evolve into modern human rights movements. Chapter 5: Kodak's Brownie Camera Revolution. Our fifth stop in 1900 takes us to a revolution that would democratize memory itself. In February 1900, the Eastman Kodak Company launched the Brownie camera, a simple, affordable device that would put photography into the hands of ordinary people for the first time in history. Before the Brownie, photography was the domain of professionals and wealthy hobbyists. Cameras were expensive, complicated, and required chemical knowledge to develop film. But George Eastman had a revolutionary idea. You press the button, we do the rest. The Brownie sold for just $1, equivalent to about $30 today, making it accessible to middle-class families. This wasn't just about technology, it was about democratizing history. Suddenly, ordinary families could capture birthdays, weddings, and everyday moments. Children could document their world. The Brownie created the concept of the family photo album and turned every person into a potential historian of their own life. The Brownie's impact on culture was immediate and profound. It sparked the amateur photography movement, influenced how people saw themselves and their families, and laid the groundwork for our modern obsession with capturing and sharing visual moments. Every selfie, every Instagram post, every family photo traces its roots back to that simple brown box camera introduced in 1900. Chapter 6: Freud publishes The Interpretation of Dreams. In November 1900, Sigmund Freud published a book that would revolutionize how we understand human psychology. The Interpretation of Dreams didn't just analyze sleep, it opened the door to the unconscious mind. Freud proposed that dreams weren't random nonsense, but meaningful expressions of our deepest desires and fears. He introduced concepts that became part of everyday language: the unconscious, repression, wish fulfillment. His famous declaration that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious challenged everything people thought they knew about the mind. The book was largely ignored at first. It sold only 600 copies in its first 8 years. But slowly, Freud's ideas began to influence not just psychology, but literature, art, and popular culture. Whether you agree with his theories or not, Freud changed how we think about human behavior, mental illness, and the complex inner workings of the mind. Modern psychotherapy, from cognitive behavioral therapy to trauma counseling, all trace their roots back to Freud's revolutionary insight that our minds contain hidden depths that influence our behavior. The couch, the talking cure, the idea that childhood experiences shape adult personality, all of this started with a book published in 1900. Chapter 7: The First Zeppelin Flight. While Freud was exploring inner space, Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin was conquering the skies. On July 2, 1900, the first rigid airship, the LZ-1, took to the air above Lake Constance in Germany. This wasn't just another flying machine, it was the birth of commercial aviation. The LZ-1 was massive, 420 feet long, longer than a football field. It stayed aloft for 18 minutes, reaching speeds of 17 miles per hour. To the thousands of spectators below, it must have seemed like magic. Humans were actually flying in a controlled, dirigible aircraft. Zeppelin's design was revolutionary. Unlike balloons, which drifted with the wind, his airships could be steered and controlled. They had rigid frames, multiple gas cells, and engines that could propel them in any direction. Within a decade, Zeppelins were carrying passengers across continents, but the legacy of that first flight was complicated. Zeppelins would become symbols of German engineering prowess, luxury passenger travel, and eventually terror during World War I bombing raids. The tragic crash of the Hindenburg in 1937 would end the age of passenger airships, but on that summer day in 1900, the Zeppelin represented pure human ambition, the dream of conquering the skies. Chapter 8. The Discovery of Blood Types. Medicine in 1900 was still dangerous and primitive by today's standards. Surgery was often fatal, and blood transfusions were essentially medical roulette. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they killed the patient. That all changed thanks to an Austrian doctor named Karl Landsteiner. Landsteiner discovered that human blood isn't all the same. It comes in different types that either mix safely or cause deadly reactions. He identified what we now call the ABO blood group system, types A, B, AB, and O. This discovery solved the mystery of why some transfusions succeeded while others were disastrous. Before Landsteiner's work, doctors knew blood transfusions could save lives, but they were playing Russian roulette with their patients. After 1900, they could match blood types and perform transfusions safely. This discovery didn't just save individual lives, it made modern surgery possible. Think about it. Without blood typing, we couldn't have organ transplants, major surgeries, or treatment for severe injuries. Every medical drama you've ever watched, every life saved in an emergency room, every surgical breakthrough, all of it depends on the work of one man in a Vienna laboratory in 1900. Chapter 9. The Second Olympics Games in Paris, May 14th to October 28th, 1900. Speaking of Paris, the city also hosted something else historic in 1900, the Second Modern Olympic Games. But these weren't the Olympics as we know them today. They were chaotic, controversial, and absolutely fascinating. The Games were overshadowed by the World's Fair, with many events scattered across 5 months. Some athletes didn't even realize they were competing in the Olympics. The marathon was held in sweltering heat, and the swimming events took place in the Seine River, which was already polluted. But 1900 was also groundbreaking. These were the first Olympics to include women, though only in 5 sports. Charlotte Cooper of Britain became the first female Olympic champion in tennis. The Games featured bizarre events like tug of war, standing high jump, and even hot air ballooning. Despite the chaos, the 1900 Olympics established important precedents. They proved that international sporting competition could work. They began the long journey toward gender equality in sports, and they showed how athletics could bring nations together in peaceful competition. Without these messy, imperfect games, we might not have the spectacular Olympics we know today. Chapter 10. The Assassination of King Umberto I of Italy. The year 1900 was marked by political violence across Europe, and nowhere was this more dramatic than in Italy. King Umberto I, known as the Good King, had ruled Italy for 22 years, but his reign came to a shocking end on July 29, 1900. Umberto had survived 2 previous assassination attempts, but anarchist Gaetano Bresci succeeded where others had failed. Bresci had traveled from New Jersey specifically to kill the king, motivated by Umberto's violent suppression of protests and his support for authoritarian policies. The assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. Monarchies were already under pressure from democratic movements and socialist ideologies. Umberto's death symbolized the vulnerability of traditional power structures in the face of revolutionary change. This wasn't just one murder, it was part of a wave of anarchist violence that included the assassination of President McKinley in 1901 and Empress Elizabeth of Austria in 1898. These attacks reflected the growing tensions between traditional authority and emerging democratic ideals that would ultimately reshape Europe in the 20th century. So there you have it, 10 incredible events from 1900 that shaped the world we live in today.